stars are within phylum Echinodermata, specifically in class Asteroida. They are radially symmetrical coelomates containing no cephalization, but have a nerve ring instead. They also have tube feet used for locomotion. The crown of thorns Acanthaster plantae is a carnivorous coral-eating sea star species that is increasingly prevalent and native throughout the Pacific and Indian Oceans. It can be seen throughout coral reefs with high populations of coral polyps, which they prey upon using the help of the poisonous spines on their arms.
The crown of thorns sea star continues to have recurring distribution and uninhibited growth in these areas, which have allowed it to inflict mass mortalities on coral populations and other reef organisms. This is specifically significant because coral reefs and their residents, such as sessile benthic communities, are already threatened from overfishing, acidification, coral bleaching, pollution, and predation.
I got you now, SpongeBob!
No!
One of the most intense and devastating research studies done about such crown of thorns sea stars invasions was conducted at the island Moorea, French Polynesia, northwest of Tahiti within the South Pacific. In this particular case, researchers studied the species' destructive measures on coral reefs and their ecosystems, with an aim of better outlining the ways these patterns can be effectively controlled. Along the island's tropical coral reefs, the research team studied massive outbreaks of these sea stars, which were described as methodic, slow-paced, and diffusive biological disturbances. This partially killed coral seen right here suffered from feeding scars left by the successive predation of the sea star. The crown of thorns were therefore seen destroying ecosystems of reef-building corals and being particularly destructive when populations spread in dense and predatory migrations into the thriving coral communities within the shallow areas. The researchers hoped to dig in deeper into this traumatic event and to specifically find the reasoning behind the origins, development, and processes that caused and influenced the crown of thorns from initiating these disastrous disturbances. Based on current knowledge of the mass impacts these sea stars have on coral reef communities, they explored how the entire progression of the outbreaks took place and unfolded.
The researchers analyzed these outbreaks by using special temporodynamics of the crown of thorns predatory population in order to track their movements and impacts around coral reef communities. They tracked the distribution of these groups of sea stars and analyzed their effects on the corals, sessile communities, and coral-feeding fishes. By utilizing these techniques, they quantitatively described the process of the outbreaks that led to the alteration in coral communities along the island's coastal line.
The researchers found the outbreak of crown of thorns sea stars and the negative effect it had. In the graph, crown of thorns density is on the x-axis and coral cover is on the y-axis. You can see the density of sea stars increases as the coral coverage decreases. Because of the decrease in coral population, the species that feed on the coral are harmed. This is called a trophic cascade. Sea stars cause a decrease in coral populations, which in turn decrease the population of butterfly fish who feed on the coral. Sea stars have an indirect effect on lower levels of the food web and cause changes in ecological structures. While the coral reefs are being harmed by predation, it is also important to remember that sea stars can promote biodiversity by eating faster-growing corals, which allows slower corals to grow without competition.
The effects crown of thorns sea star populations have on the abundance of coral reefs threaten not only their longevity and population resilience, but the other organisms through which coral reefs interact with as well. Specifically, their decimation has the potential to exhibit declines in fish populations that utilize them for both consumption and safety purposes, leaving their skeletons to be overcome by invasive algae species. This is of specific concern considering the already growing consequences climate change exhibits on coral reefs and their unsurmountable importance. Much of the current methods aimed at depleting the success of such crown of thorn takeovers operates through the removal of adult populations from the shallow bays that they inhabit. However, as described in the proposed study, a more effective approach may involve the monitoring of deeper reef bases, where their larvae found success amongst coral rubble and certain forms of algae. In this way, the dangerously efficient life cycle of the crown of thorns can be adequately inhibited, and the coral reefs that they are depleting can hopefully be saved.